views and opinions expressed on Explorers Secrets of the Truth or that of their guests or contributors are those of the speakers and do not necessarily reflect the views or positions of any entities they represent. All information on Explorers Secrets of the Truth is provided in good faith, however, we make no representation or warranty of any kind, express or implied, regarding the accuracy, adequacy, validity, reliability, availability, or completeness of any information on this talk show or website.
From monsters and ghosts to otherworldly beings, join the Explorers as they venture into the darkest realms, seeking the truth to what goes bump in the night.
Here we are.
Good evening and welcome to Explorers Secrets of the Truth, episode 64. Tonight, as always, I'm joined by my best friend and co-host. How are you doing this evening, Les and Cabbage?
I'm doing perfectly fine, Chad Charlesworth. How about you, my friend?
Oh, I am doing great. Just great.
Good. Well, great is better than bad. Well, we got Rick Russell in the house. Hey, Rick, good to see you. And Bridget is here, too, from Australia. That's awesome. Sorry if I mispronounced your name. I'm not good with names, as you'll learn. But thank you for tuning in. Good to see you from Australia. So you could, I guess I'll do the normal spiel with tuning in. You can find us live here on Facebook. You can find us live on YouTube. You could find us on X, formerly known as Twitter. You can find us on our website, explorersgroup.com. And we said live on Facebook and YouTube. So if you comment like Rick and Bridget did there, we should see the comments come through on our end, and then we could reply back to you live. So if there's anything that you guys want to ask us at any point during the show, just comment underneath and hopefully we'll see it and we could reply to you live. So that's how you do it.
Yeah, I mean, great. Now on to tonight's show. So tonight we're going to be discussing some of the lesser known UFO events, and our major focus tonight is going to be in Pennsylvania, seeing that Les and I are both, well, Les still lives there and I'm originally from there.
Yeah.
So we're going to talk,
state, at least.
Home state basically. So we're going to talk some of the lesser known events there. So we've already covered like some Kecksburg stuff over the years. On our website, explorersgroup.com. You can find that on it's in the video page, right? Is that what it's called?
The live shows tab. And also don't forget, Chad, you could go back and listen to our archive shows on your favorite podcast provider like Spotify, Apple Podcast, Amazon Music, Google Play, and pretty much all those out there. So you get a lot of our archive shows are now being uploaded. I think we're up to episode 45, right, on the podcasts.
Yeah, I think that's what you said today. Was 45 you had gotten up to.
Yeah. So, and some of these, just so you guys are aware, this show is live, as you could tell by my intro as I tripped through it. The shows are live, so sometimes if I'm able to, I go back and I'll edit them. Like episode 45, we had a section that was blocked out because this show is riddled with technical difficulties, as anybody who follows us for a while knows. So I had to go back and fix some of that. So episode 45 should be a cleaner version than what the live show was. So I'm trying to clean them up as I go through. So the archives will be slightly different than the live. But that's that. But yeah, like Chad said, you could check out the Kecksburg episode. I think it's 43, and I just recently put that one up last week. So Anyway, sorry, I didn't mean to interject there.
No, I was just, wanted to make sure we plugged the website that we have for And
Yeah.
so people don't think we just skip over Kecksburg too, because you know how that goes. And they'd be like, "Why didn't you talk about Kecksburg?" Well, we already have.
Well, we did, yeah.
Yeah.
Which it was a good show too. So I highly recommend you check that out.
I'm
And before we go on, what's that?
I'm partial to all the shows. So
Yeah, me too. I listen to them every time I go out in my car. Bridget actually has a question. She says, "How long have you two been together?"
Romantically, or
well, romantically throughout the whole thing. What the heck was that? I just saw a screen pop up like somebody was joining in there, and it popped back out again. Technical difficulties.
Oh, that's cool, because mine actually shook on my side. It looked like it shook. Like both of our pictures moved, like somebody was popping in with us.
Great. Well, for those of us those of you watching us on Facebook, we do have an indicator on our back end here saying that there's some sort of an issue with Facebook. So hopefully it is playing. I can't see it on Facebook Live right now, but hopefully it is playing. I mean, obviously Bridget is commenting from Facebook, so I'm assuming it is working. Yes, the show, not romantically. Well, romantically, 30 years. yeah. But the show, we started that in
2013. We did our first shows.
It's been a long time, because we did, before we did the live show, we did pre-recorded shows. So yeah, 2013 I would say is a safe date.
Not consistently, but we've done them since.
Yeah, off and on. But the live show has been since, I think, 2017, I believe.
I want to say
something. But romantically, 30 years.
Yeah.
Hopefully that answers your question. Now, before we drag this on any further, Chad, I have a question for you.
Okay.
Why do you think aliens visit Earth? Why do you think they come here? Like, what do you think the reasons would be?
Well, that is very interesting. So one of the, I guess, common held beliefs with like the Anunnaki origin stories and stuff like that was, we were created as a slave race to mine gold for them.
Mm-hmm.
So the whole mining of gold part of it, people were like, well, why gold? Right?
Mm-hmm.
So back in the 80s or 90s, they were doing studies on our ozone layer here on Earth, and they were trying to figure out ways to stabilize it, or if we did completely deplete it, how could we create a safety zone from the radiation?
Mm-hmm.
So they go through all these different tests, and what they found was that nanoparticles of gold dropped into the atmosphere actually absorb and reflect the radiation. So you have the Anunnaki stories, which are legends that have been passed down, where this gold is so important to these people. So was it that they had destroyed their ozone basically on their planet and realized there's a supply of gold here on this planet, we need to harvest it, but we don't want to do it ourselves? Maybe the environment wasn't friendly to their type, so they created us. We mined the gold, they took the gold, shredded it into nanoparticles, dropped it in their environment.
Mm-hmm.
But the whole thing about that is people were saying the gold. That's why they had us, was for gold mining.
Right.
Like I said, the 80s and 90s is when we figured out that gold nanoparticles suspended in the environment would work as an ozone layer.
Right.
So this ancient myth, legend, whatever you want to consider it, talks about gold as being so important. And think about gold, really, on Earth, we assess such a great value to it, but it's really not one of the better usable metals.
Right.
So you have this, like, we then assign like the currency backed by gold, the rulers wanting the gold, the treasure always being gold and jewels and gemstones. Right. So, it took us until the 80s and 90s to figure out the whole gold suspended in the atmosphere part of it. But these people are talking thousands of years ago were already understanding the importance of gold here on Earth.
Right.
So then you have like the thought process of like enslavement, you know, they're going to come here and enslave the human race and use us for, you know, mining, or, you know, like the Anunnaki story with the mining,
Yeah.
or maybe for breeding. You know,
Mhm.
maybe it's some kind of something we have that maybe they're lacking nowadays.
Right. Right. Which
Yeah.
to go back, if you don't mind me interjecting here, to go back to the Anunnaki story, that makes a lot of sense, because if you look back at a lot of ancient hieroglyphs, ancient Egypt,
Mm.
Aztec, Mayan, all that stuff, like the down in South America and whatnot, even some Native American petroglyphs and whatnot, you always see like this gods or whatever that would descend from the sky, and they're always larger than the earthbound people, and it's
Mm.
always offering. There's always like they're offering and kneeling and giving praise and or whatever. That makes a lot of sense if you think about it, with the mining of the gold to create an artificial atmosphere, that
Mhm.
the human race would be supplying the gold and whatnot. They'd be mining it and supplying it to these gods that come
Mhm.
down from the sky. So that makes a lot of sense.
Well, and also, like, if you go back to what you were saying there, these gods or whatever are always depicted as much larger than the humans.
Hmm.
Well, think about a much larger species of, say, humanoid species.
Hmm.
With Earth's gravity, the effects on their body being larger would be greater, you know, and maybe they come from a planet with a lower gravity level. So by creating the human race as this enslaved species that they're using,
Hmm.
um, it's a lot easier for us to mine the gold maybe on our planet than it would be for them.
Right. That
And
makes
then,
sense. I mean,
yeah,
if you go ahead, sorry.
no, go ahead.
No, well, there is that theory that the human race originated in Mars, and then the atmosphere at Mars depleted and whatnot,
Mm.
and we ended up somehow getting to Earth. But if you look at what you're saying with the Anunnaki, maybe the Martians, because Mars actually does have a not as strong of a gravitational pull as Earth, so
Mm.
you would have a larger species, or you wouldn't have that gravitational pull where you could grow taller and whatnot.
Mm.
So we're the fairly close, in planetary, neighbors.
Yeah.
Um, it wouldn't be, I mean, if their technology is that far advanced, it wouldn't be that difficult for them to kind of get back and forth between Earth and Mars. And maybe they were mining and trying to save Mars,
Mhm.
and that ended up not working, obviously, because there is not much of an atmosphere up there at all. And maybe that race ended up dying out, or is maybe somewhere, which we will talk about later,
Yeah.
taking up inhabitants somewhere here. You know what I mean? And because like
Mhm.
the gold didn't work.
Yeah.
Um, and then that kind of goes off into the enslaving and breeding that you were touching on here
Yeah.
next. Hey, OS, how you doing, buddy? It's good to see you joining
Yeah.
in here. And
So,
say that.
like the breeding part of it and stuff like that, it's you. If we were created to be an enslaved race, or they come here to enslave us, they're going to want us to breed to create more slaves.
Yep.
The longer you're enslaved, the more docile, they can make us.
Hmm.
Then there's the old, like science fiction thought process of, well, we're food.
Yep. What was it that How to Serve Humans? It was that one movie way back in the day, To Serve Man or something like that. And they thought they were coming to serve us, but they were
Mm.
actually how to prepare and serve to eat man.
I don't think I've ever seen that, but yeah, I mean, that
Oh
would be
yeah, it's an old
basically
black and
it.
white one.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then you have like it's a new home.
Hmm.
Maybe they're looking to colonize. Like they have looked at us for so long and they're like, yeah, we could just take part of, a part of their planet and use it for our own without necessarily even interacting with them. And then it's the
Right.
glimpses, it's the accidental sightings, it's the hey, they were out, and we saw something land in the woods, and we saw these little men and next to it.
Yeah.
So, it could be like a new home, the whole thought process of they don't necessarily have to take over. Like, they don't necessarily have to interact. It's like there's plenty of, like, if you go to the that one island where we leave the native population alone because they are like primitive humans. So it's almost like a a study in anthropology there at that point.
Right.
Then you also have to, like, I don't know, I'm a big fan of the movie Prometheus, which is the
Yep.
kickoff for the Alien series. What if we were just an experiment and the sightings now are them coming back to observe? Like, in Prometheus, they create the human race through their genetics and the natural elements found on the planet. And then they did this in multiple different galaxies and planets, and they just every group evolves differently. And
Right.
maybe they've looked at us and we're almost like a zoo where they're coming to watch, they're coming to observe, they're coming to see where we are in our evolution. How do we
Right.
compare to say the other planet that they seed it? Well, that other planet isn't maybe as warlike as we are. Maybe they're
Right.
more pacifist, and their culture is more accepting of these different things, and so it's their study of, well, what do you become?
Yeah.
Like, we seeded this planet, say they seeded 10 planets, and every planet's slightly different, so now they're just collecting the data and you know developing their answer to my next point or next thought on this is maybe it's the Galactic Society, like the whole like Star Trek like thought process of like they're coming here, they're looking, they're saying, we're not quite ready to be part of this. Maybe one
Yeah.
day, 400 years down the road, they land on the whatever the 400 years from now White House front lawn, the Buckingham Palace, the Kremlin, all these different countries, and they're like, look, hey, there's a group of us out here. We've been watching you. You finally got to the point where we think we can trust you. Let's start helping you guys get out here and explore, or help you guys, get off your planet. And 400 years from now, we may be able to transfer
Do it
wormholes
ourselves
and stuff like that. Maybe that's the whole thing, is like they're just it's a society of what we would call aliens out there, different planets, different types of aliens, and they're looking and they're saying, we got to check on some of these people every so often, and hey, it's it's not the right time, but we're going to kind of let them know we're here now. Maybe it's a slow introduction to it. That's why I said maybe like 400 years from now they finally show up, land in the front yard and say, hey, we want to introduce ourselves.
You're ready.
Yeah.
You're ready to meet us.
Yeah, you're ready to become part of this.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, Bridget has a good point there, where the technology we have today had to come from somewhere, because and that's a fair point too, because if you think about the advancement in just the last 100 years of technology, I mean, we went from 1800s still fairly primitive. I mean, it's still horse and buggy. It's still, all primitive way of living. You know what I mean? And then all of a sudden it's the combustion engine and, the industrial age and all this stuff. And it's like, whoosh, this huge wave of technology that just takes off. And to go back to a lot of like the pictographs and whatnot and the hieroglyphs and everything, you kind of see a lot of that almost like exchange of technology, like almost like you were saying before, like, all right, well, maybe we weren't necessarily like enslaved to the point where we were just a slave and we're just doing a job. Maybe it was almost like an exchange of goods. It's like, all right, well, if you guys do all this for us, this is what we'll give you. Or in order to speed up the processes, here's some technology or here's some tools or ideas that will make the work faster or whatever. You know what I mean? It's looking back on it, it might go ahead.
Like even the simple process of like shaping flint, like the Clovis points are a very specific methodology to do it, where some alien species could be like, well, look, let me show you how to do this. It's going to really be sharp and it's really going to work for multiple things. And it's not the the samurai sword, but it is the beginning of the, hey, we can now kill larger game, we can now feed more people, we can now we can travel further because we can store food, and we know if we get to an area where there's mammoths, we can kill them. So even simple, like we always jump to this technology. We always say, oh, we're talking to each other, we're 6 hours apart and we're looking at each other. There are people watching us from all around the world, I hope. So we always think in the grand, like the big things. But what if it is just the simple stuff? The simple stuff starts you on the path to the grand stuff.
Yep.
If we don't learn how to make these points, maybe our species doesn't survive in certain environments now. Yeah. Because those points allowed us to hunt in greater areas. It allowed us greater kill capacity, which is, what we have to do as a species to eat at that point. So it allowed us to continue forward. It also allowed us to find more minerals, more gold, more quartz, more silver, copper. It allowed us to find all these things, which then move us into these advanced technologies.
Right. Like, you go from like the Stone Age to the Bronze Age to the Iron Age, and it's like all these different eras have the, a little bit further advanced tool systems and whatnot. I mean, even take ancient Egypt, for example, like with just like weights and pulleys and levers and all that. I mean, how do you lift these gigantic stones to these heights to build the pyramids and all that stuff?
Aliens.
Well, I mean, this technology has to come from somewhere. You know what I mean? Even look at like Leonardo da Vinci and some of the stuff that he came up with.
Yeah. I mean, basically a helicopter. The problem was we just didn't have the technology back then to make it work.
Right.
But he designed it back then.
Yeah, and Cindy has a good point too. And thanks for tuning in, Cindy. Good to see you. You have all these different civilizations and cultures all throughout the world, and going back thousands of years. You didn't have the internet, you didn't have television, you didn't have these means of broadcasting and communicating, but yet you take like hieroglyphics or drawings, like whatever etchings in South America, and compare it to Egypt. The elongated skull kind of concept. These people in these little machines that look like a space pod of some sort. Some of the outfits that they have these people depicted in looks like a space suit. You know what I mean? So it's like, if there were these other beings that would come to a different planet, it's almost the same concept as when we would go to space. You have to have that spacesuit to protect you from certain things. You have to have oxygen to let you breathe and whatnot. So I would imagine when they would come here, it's kind of the same concept, that you want to make sure that you're protected against an unknown element.
Yeah, but that always brings.
Go ahead.
Yeah, that always brings me to the thought, though, of, is our society, our civilization, a lot older than we think it is?
Yeah.
I mean, the water erosion on the Sphinx shows 10,000 years or so prior to the time they say it was built.
Right.
So it's showing patterns of erosion that can only happen the way it is shaped currently. It was also a lot bigger back then.
Yep, I was going to say, yeah.
So is our society a lot older? Is it
Yeah.
the Graham Hancock, we build ourselves up so far, we destroy 80-90% of the population, that last 10% is going to draw those pictures of, hey, in 1960 we started traveling in space. Yeah, I'm saying our future. We went
Yeah.
traveling in space, so they started drawing the Apollo rockets, the Saturn rockets, and stuff like that.
Yeah.
And then people in the future are looking at it going, looks like a space type thing.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
we're missing the middle pieces that tie it all together. Like, we're seeing these depictions, but maybe it's depictions of an older version of our society where we just constantly think we're only X thousands of years old in our modern form, and then our modern form is all we know. We don't know anything prior. So
I mean, that's a fair point, because if you look at a lot of these civilizations, take like the Aztecs and the Mayans and stuff like that, the Egyptians, they got to this point. I mean, you take some of those old Mayan civilizations or cities, they were grand, covering miles of space in the jungle,
they
and
were
then all
larger
of a
than
sudden
some modern cities
exactly, and then all of a
and
sudden
populated as
gone.
heavily. Yeah.
Yep.
And
They had their own
populated as heavily.
aqueduct systems
Yeah.
that predated even the Roman aqueducts and whatnot.
Yeah.
But you take the Romans, you take the Egyptians and stuff. It's like these civilizations, they get, like, to exactly to your point, they get so big it's almost like that experiment 25 or whatever it is, where your population grows and grows and grows and grows and grows, and then it's like this influx of destruction and almost like civil unrest. You destroy yourselves to, like you said, to a certain point, and it's, well, I guess it would be whatever scratching into stone is your only way to document your current history, and then it's starting all over again. Because again, going back to a lot of these ancient civilizations, some of the technologies that they have depicted shouldn't have even existed.
Mm-hmm.
So it's like a build up and a start over, build up and a start over. But
so Cindy brought up a good point here with the do you think that the flood in the Bible would have covered everything up, such as in the desert and with dirt, etc.? Well, what you got to realize is when we think of modern coastline, right, we think about England is not connected to mainland Europe.
mm-hmm.
Okay. Back in the Ice Age, the water level was 120 to 130 meters shallower.
Yeah.
And when you think about it, then there's a in the connection between England and mainland Europe is called Doggerland.
Mm-hmm.
Well, they have found villages underwater in the English Channel, Neolithic villages. Okay. You go to Japan, they find those temples off the coast of Japan. Well, the thing is, when you look at where the coastlines would have been, where do most people live in populated modern society?
Along the water,
along the coast.
Yeah.
Your waterways. I mean, think about where our major cities are in America. Yeah, we have some Midwest cities and stuff like that. I'm not knocking, any particular, but if you think about it, New York, Boston, Philadelphia, you start going down the coast, Savannah, Georgia, and stuff like that. Your major cities now, you have like Atlanta and stuff like that that's developed into a major city.
Yeah.
You go on the West Coast, even in Mexico, you had a lot of major areas along the coast.
Mm-hmm.
Well, now, if you took the coast out, say in some areas, a couple hundred miles, your civilizations that we would be looking for as our ancestral civilizations could be 100 miles out to sea.
That's true. Yeah.
120 to 130 meters underwater.
Mm-hmm.
Unless there's another ice age, we're not going to necessarily find those Neolithic, what we consider Neolithic villages, right?
Yeah.
We've found some, but we haven't been able to, we can't explore it all. Like most of the ocean is still unexplored.
Yeah.
You know, we've mapped it, we've done this, we say, oh, there's nothing there. Well, we're mapping it with sonar. We're not necessarily sending a camera down there everywhere going, that oddly looks like it's a non-natural shaped rock.
Mm-hmm.
Why is there this shape on the bottom of the ocean? Oh, well, why is it connected to this somehow? You know, so you would have stuff like that. The Atlantis, the lost continent of Atlantis, at the end of the Younger Dryas is when we do have a. It's not necessarily the time frame with the biblical flood, but we have a flood that changes our coast. It changes most of our planet. So you have you have like the deserts in Africa were once lush, tropical jungles and had massive lakes and rivers and inland seas. I mean, you always hear, like nowadays, like inland seas. I mean, Pennsylvania at one point was underwater.
Yeah.
Now we're part of the Appalachian mountain chain where, most of the state is at a relatively safe elevation from the ocean. So, the environment would have changed over these years. So you might have these older civilizations.
Right.
So, and the, biblical flood, is it a reference to the 12,500 years ago with the end of the Younger Dryas and the flooding? Like it would, because it's a shared story also.
Yeah.
It's shared in multiple cultures. It's shared in multiple religions. That there was this flood. Now the Noah character is Gilgamesh. It's Noah. It's different incarnations.
Yeah.
And also their stories are relatively the same. When you break it down to the core of what the story is saying, it's relatively the same story. It's just some maybe more magical stuff on this side, less magical on this side, more, spiritual to this person, more, just cut and dry, like, hey, the guy had a boat, he got lucky.
Yeah. Yeah.
So, and then there's also the theory, like we were getting back to the original point here and diverting from the flood. One of the theories that you and I have always kind of put out there is, what if aliens are just time traveling humans or space traveling humans?
Yep, I still subscribe to that.
Yeah, we advance so far, and maybe we leave Earth and get thousands of years, hundreds of years of space travel. Our bodies would change because of the environment, the atmosphere, and all that. It takes about 5,000 years for a set evolutionary happening. Right. So it takes 5,000 years. So say we're 10, 20,000 years into space travel. Humans no longer need to be 6 foot tall.
Right.
200 and some pounds. They don't need body fat.
Right.
They need less muscle because they have created, these gravity systems in their ships and on planets that we're inhabiting and space stations. But one of the things we'd also lose is the healthy gut bacteria.
Yeah.
So if you think about a lot of these, between the animal mutilations and the old, I hate, it's the oldest, alien, did they probe you?
Yeah.
Well, if you look like Betty and Barney Hill story, there was probing of semen, vaginal fluids, anal probing, oral probing. They're getting bacteria. They're getting bacteria, and maybe some of the genetics that they've lost by taking semen and maybe female eggs, they're getting the missing DNA. Right. They're getting the missing bacteria. So therefore, it's us from the future coming here to go, yeah, we're starting to kill ourselves off because maybe there's a limited number of healthy That's why earlier I said breeding. Maybe there's a limited number of healthy humans or non-sterile humans in the future because of the loss of bacteria, the loss of the genetics.
Mhm.
You know, so maybe really aliens are just future humans.
Yeah.
And if you can time travel and, the different paradoxes and all that, well, if you're 20,000 years into the future, you're not going to meet anybody that you would know. And
Right.
if our genetics changed by space travel, you're not even meeting the same species,
Right.
right? If we went back in time and met Homo florensis,
Yeah.
we're not the same.
No.
We're
No. It's
from the
3 foot
same,
tall little
yeah,
thing. Yeah.
yeah, we're from the same lines, but we're not the same thing. So therefore, we wouldn't probably change our future
Right.
because they die off. So maybe there's an evolutionary step in humankind, and then the old form us dies off, and these new space traveling ones end up realizing, like, oh shit, there's things we needed from them.
Yeah. Yeah. We got to
Yeah,
go back.
we got, oh, turn around, go back. It's too cold.
Well, it's kind of like that. And there's been a couple variations of this video that's been circulating around where this government group has an alien being that looks like the typical gray, and they're
Mhm.
interrogating it, and it's saying that it's us from the future,
Yeah.
and they're like, well, what happened is that, and that we can't at our stage of our evolutionary journey, like today, we
Mhm.
couldn't comprehend how we've changed to these future beings.
Mhm.
But I mean, in some of the things that it was saying in that video too, is how they had to come back and make sure we don't kill ourselves off, and they needed to harvest stuff from this phase of evolution. And
Mhm.
we'll be talking about this in a future show too. And we're talking about, and well, you brought up the breeding and whatnot. So there's that hybridization, not maybe necessarily of us with an alien species, but us with the future of our species,
Mhm.
or
Yeah.
species Gen 10 at that point. Because there's a lot of these abduction stories of people. Well, take the Travis Walton case, for
Mhm.
example. If you listen, like, not the Fire in the Sky version, the movie version, but if you
Mhm.
actually listen to a lot of his interviews, he says that when he's on the ship, there's different species of beings on this ship. There's
Yeah.
the like the typical grays, and then there's like what would it be considered like the Nordics, like the
Mhm.
tall blonde. They look like us, but they're taller, and they look like us, but there's just something off. And he was referring to them as the hybrids. So
Mhm.
maybe, like you were saying, the future humans, the grays, let's just say that the grays are the future us.
Mhm.
So they're sterile, they're to a point where they've evolved so much that they've lost what they need to continue. So then the hybrids would be like Gen 11,
Mhm.
of the new species, of the mix of the old and the new, to create a stronger future.
I
I don't
believe
know.
that the children of the future treat them right. I don't remember the rest of the song, but I just want to go there.
I know. That's very
So,
good. That's very good.
yeah,
But yeah, go on.
that's definitely one of the possibilities when you start to think about, like, why they do come here. You
Yeah.
know, I would, again, we've always kind of said, I would more believe time travel
Yeah.
than necessarily some species of aliens that looks very similar to us. Like,
Yeah.
if you think about, like, the stories of the Nordic and all that,
Mm.
they look humanoid. They look, like humans,
Yeah.
from the Nordic areas. Blonde hair, blue eyes, like, unless they grew up on a planet that was very similar to ours, because think about it, like, that's the beauty of the human species. If we are 1 degree closer to the sun, we aren't who we are today.
Right.
If we're 1 degree further away from the sun, we aren't who we are today.
Right.
Our bodies have been, evolved to this point of we are where we are because of who we are.
Right. And where we are.
Yeah. So to have a group of aliens that kind of sort of look like us would really kind of be less believable to me.
Yeah.
Like the little gray alien would be more believable as a separate species because they might be that 1 degree further or 1 degree closer, or higher gravity, lower gravity.
Mm-hmm.
We see this on other planets, so therefore that would more make me think of like a true extraterrestrial.
Yeah.
But when you're seeing these, or people are reporting these, humanoid or human-esque, but a little off, well, it almost makes me think time travel. Like that more, it's more believable in my thought process, or I could create a better case to lay out to people to say it's time travel. Then the odds of us seeing something that looks like us, like even on our own planet, we have 99.8% genetic relatives. There's similarities, but we know they're not us.
Yeah.
I've seen, some very cute little chimps and stuff like that, but it's a chimp. It's not a human.
Right.
So,
right.
Well, I think we should probably, since it's already 12 after,
get
into tonight's topic.
Yes, that's for sure. There are a few other questions in here that people have posted that I want to touch base back on, but I do want to start getting into more of the topic here. So the question is, why are aliens coming here, and what would be the benefit? And we're covering just in Pennsylvania, because if you think about it, there are stories from all around the world, all around the United States, globally and whatnot. So we're going to narrow it down to Pennsylvania just because it's going to make it a little bit easier to keep everything into perspective. So we have so many reports that are coming in. And actually, Bridget had asked a question, how come we're seeing more UFOs now than ever? Well, if you look back through history, there is a ton of things that indicate, like we were talking about, hieroglyphs, petroglyphs, even like Renaissance paintings have little depictions of what look like UFOs and people looking to the skies and these little ships that look like the stereotypical round flying saucer. And I think the only reason why it seems to be more common or more prevalent now is because of the internet and television and the forms of communication that we have now. It's so much easier to put that stuff out there. So I don't think it's just that there's more now than before. I think it's just there's more accessibility to getting your story or your sighting out there. And I think that's probably why. That's just my opinion as to why that would be like that. But anyways, so we're going to talk about a couple of reports throughout the state of Pennsylvania and some similarities that they have. And the first one that we want to talk about tonight of UFO reports, and to put a finer point to it, we're going to be, like I said, we're going to be talking specifically Pennsylvania reports. And this is the Carbondale UFO story. And a few facts about Carbondale is it has an elevation of 1,043 feet above sea level. Carbondale is located a few miles north of Scranton, PA, as everybody knows from the hit TV show The Office. That's where Scranton is, and that's about an hour north from where I'm at, actually. And it has about a 26.65% poverty rate. And the reason why I bring that up is a lot of times when you have a higher poverty level, sometimes you have things. Drugs, alcohol use is usually higher in higher poverty areas. So sometimes that can affect the way people view things and see things. Obviously, if they're under the influence of something, it may not be true to life or exactly what they see or say. But after you get done chugging from your gallon jug, you could talk a little bit more about Carbondale.
Okay. So on November 9th, 1974, at approximately 1900, three Carbondale teenage boys reported to the Carbondale police that they had observed a glowing airborne object traveling east to west rapidly. It descended and crashed into a silt pond in the Russell Park area in Carbondale. A crowd of 1,500 people quickly went to the crash site, where planes and helicopters were flying low overhead. So the Carbondale UFO drew police, military, UFO enthusiasts, and spectators from all over the country in 1974. A green-tinged glow illuminated the pond for 9 hours. After 2 days, a diver emerged from the murky water with only an old railroad lantern.
Before I go into my part, I find that a little odd, because how would a railroad lantern, especially one from back then, it's not going to be like a battery powered, most likely not a battery powered, it would be an oil lamp. So how that would
1970s, they probably had a battery.
maybe I'm going a little too far back, I guess.
Yeah, because I mean, by that point, consumable batteries were available.
Yeah, but a lot of them weren't really waterproof.
Well, if you're a railroad lantern, might have had to be waterproof because of they would be used for sighting and signaling them. So if it's pouring down rain, you need something
maybe water resistant. I don't know about submersible, but I don't know.
Mm-hmm.
I just thought that was a little weird. But
and also, when was it thrown in there though?
Right.
How many? The zip line up there, back home by the airport. There's cars under that water that are from like the 1960s or 70s. Now, nobody knows exactly when they ended up going in there, but they're there.
They're there, exactly, and refrigerators and a crane, and whatnot, But so back to the report. Kay Pope, who was 15 at the time and is now 58, remembers riding her bicycle to the Russell Park area and seeing it cordoned off by the military. She also saw what appeared to be something large being removed from the area. And she says, in quote, "We always rode our bikes up there," says Pope, who now lives in Blakely. "I saw a big flatbed truck on the road with something huge on it that was covered. And there were a lot of people in military uniforms." So what Chad and I had said is basically the story in a nutshell. That's the report. But now entering is the alleged hoaxer, which Chad will tell you about.
Yeah. So there's this gentleman by the name of Gillette, and he had told the Times Tribune, which is I believe, Scranton Wilkes-Barre, might be the Scranton paper, in 1999, that he threw a battery-powered sealed beam lantern into the water to scare his sister, but the legend has since lived on.
See, if I would have let you read that, I guess that would have answered my whole lantern question.
Yeah. That's why I was trying to steer you.
Yeah. I'm not the brightest bulb in the lantern, you know what I mean?
It's not quite watertight in there, is it, buddy?
No.
So, after seeing the pond and people talking with the locals who were around at the time, people didn't buy the lantern story. Mm-hmm. That this lantern's behind this hole, because remember, the boys saw this thing in the air.
Yeah.
They didn't see it. They didn't just see the pond glowing. They saw something go through the air,
which drew them to the park.
Which they saw start descending, which drew them to this area. It wasn't something that, they were pedaling their bike and they looked and were like, "Why is water glowing? Let's go take a look. Oh God, it's an alien. We gotta go call the cops."
Right.
Well, it's 1974 also. This is back then you would have had to ride to somebody's house, ask them to use their phone, call the police. You also got to think, back in 1974 in this part of the country, parents would beat the crap out of you if you got in trouble, or if you called the police
for a nonsense story, yeah,
you would have got a beating. So like these kids, like definitely, there's something more to that story than just somebody threw a lantern in the water, and also to scare his sister. How would he know his
Yeah.
sister would see the lantern in the water? Like, unless he was like, let's go to the pond.
Yeah.
So I don't even buy the story. So, you get into why would you call in the people that were called in with heavy machinery to take out a lantern out of a pond also?
Right.
Like this girl is saying she saw people, heavy equipment being brought into the area to remove a
Something
lantern.
huge on a flatbed truck. Yeah, not a
Yeah.
lantern.
Yeah, that doesn't make any sense in that sense, in that part of it.
Right.
So, like, people think there's definitely something that happened. Now, they're
Mhm.
not saying necessarily UFO, but they're saying something. Okay.
Mhm.
So, a couple of years ago, Gillette, who was then at the time 56 years old, was hanging around at the hotel during a Saturday event that they had for an alien landing anniversary and celebration. And he basically now claims the story that he told the newspaper back then
Mhm.
wasn't true.
Mhm.
And he goes on, his now modern version of what he said. My girlfriend broke up with me, so I was in a bad mood. I told them what they wanted to hear. It was a
Mhm.
lantern. It wasn't a lantern. Something was pulled out of that pond. So,
Mm.
you know, they have now, or at least that a couple of years ago, I don't know if they still do it. They do have an event, um, you know, for people to come to, and they have, like MUFON people speak at it. It's part, different. It's a Paracon based
Yeah.
ufology con. So,
Yeah. It's
you know,
like
you
it's like
do,
the Mothman Festival, kind of. You know
Mhm.
what I mean? Because it's a local
Yeah.
story.
So you have like Bill Weber, who's the network chief investigator for Pennsylvania and Delaware.
Mhm.
And, he said in an interview that he doesn't have any extensive knowledge about the Carbondale incident. And based on what he knew, he's basically, the jury's still out on it. He's not saying it's a real sighting, but he's also not saying that it's a lantern and just knock it off. It's a hoax.
Right.
So, and he went on to say, I hear reports of lights in the skies, maneuvers in the skies, unknown objects, triangles in the sky. In
Mhm.
Pennsylvania, we average about 25 to 35 cases a month.
Hmm.
So they have the means to test some of the credibility of the witnesses, but
Yeah.
we take reports, we establish contact, with the witnesses or witnesses, groups, and they do their own little investigation. They do some internet searches. They do FAA requests, local police, state police requests. Yeah, they try to get to the bottom of it, but in 85% of the cases, the investigators are unable to explain what the people saw.
Right.
And then, the other 15% of the time, I think I just reversed that. 85% of the time, they're able to explain it.
Right.
15% of the time, they don't have an answer.
Yeah.
But also, these aren't necessarily the upper echelon of experts in any fields of, the sciences. These are people who volunteer their time, who are interested in the subject. Some of them may be, well versed in science, but you never quite know.
Right.
So, and now get back to Gillette, who was the alleged hoaxer. He doesn't think it's aliens.
Mhm.
That's one of the things. He doesn't feel that the aliens were responsible for what they had seen, but he said it was perhaps, a Soviet satellite
Yeah.
that had
Yeah.
crashed. Which isn't crazy, because we have, we were testing stuff, they were testing stuff. We have in the ghost rockets in Finland and in Norway and stuff like that. You have the ghost rocket sightings.
Mhm.
So I mean, it could have been a satellite. And the funny thing about it is the people in the area, like the people who were alive and witnessed or were around that time, never
Mhm.
called it a UFO. They never said it was a UFO. They said it
Mhm.
was something. They never called it a UFO. Now, by 1970, the term UFO was
Was common, yeah.
a common thing, but they never called it a UFO. They were just saying they saw something. It went into this pond. People came, they pulled it out of the pond, and the newspaper and officials were the ones who basically started pushing the thing of it. Oh, it's a UFO.
Right, right. Sorry if you see me making funny faces. I have an eye spasm and it's driving me crazy.
Yeah, I was watching you like rub your eye and twitch over there. I was
It's
like,
not Tourette's. But anyway, so I find this kind of odd how you have the kid. Well, at the time, a kid
mhm.
makes this, oh, I faked it and blah blah blah. Then down the line, he changes his story. The plot twist around. Um, do you think he's telling the truth, or do you think this is like, all right, well, now since all this crap has gained popularity and there's the festivals and all that stuff that they have, is this just an attempt to get like maybe another 15 minutes of fame or something to try and like save face or something, like rather than being known as the guy who tried to poo poo on it and say, no, this isn't real. This whole festival's a sham. Is he just trying to kind of recoil and be like, no, 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 no. I look, I admit I faked it. It was real. It was real. I want to be part of the team now. You know what I mean? I don't know. What are your thoughts on
It, I would say it's paratourism at its best.
it? Hmm.
His involvement, I would say his changing of the story is more to collect on the modern fame of it.
Hmm.
Um, you know, but then again, too, he was a kid. Did he just tell these people, or maybe he did at one point throw this lantern into the water, and that's why they allegedly found this. A diver pulls a lantern out of the water. Maybe it's
True.
just
Yeah, so maybe his story is true.
yeah,
Yeah.
maybe it's just coincidental timing. Like he did this a couple days before, and then all of a sudden this thing falls into the water. They removed the large object, and then maybe they were looking for, like, once they got the large objects out of the water, maybe they saw like, oh, there's something missing, something broke off. So
Right.
now we
Right.
need to send divers in to secure whatever the piece that broke off is, or the
Right.
fragments, or the wreckage, so it's not contaminating the water, or causing some kind of possible bacteria outbreak or a space virus or something like
Yeah.
that.
Yeah. Which
But
I'll bring up the picture of the what do you even want to call it? Pond? I wouldn't even call it a lake.
the silt pond.
Yeah, it looks like, yeah, like a stripping pit, like a yeah, silt pond. So
Yep.
it's very small body of water. I mean, if you take for those of you who might be listening in the future when this is just an audio podcast, it's basically a strip and pit. For those who don't know, coal mining is huge around here. So a strip and pit is where they would back dig the ground. They would strip the land. They would strip mine the ore out of the ground, leave this giant hole. They fill up with water, and they're just these nasty uh, silt ponds that are just really gross. So some of them are huge, some of them are smaller. This one is not a large strip and pit based off of the image that I could see here. So a very large craft I couldn't imagine would fit in there. But I mean, I don't know. I wasn't there. I don't know how big the thing was, but um, I couldn't even see a lantern illuminating this entire body of water like they said it did. I mean, I could imagine maybe a small corner or part of it. I mean, you put a lantern in this water. I can't see it. I can't see it illuminating the whole entire thing like they said in the the boys on the bicycle,
Yeah. And, some people often wonder, because I'll use the term paratourism. It's a thing I coined a couple of years ago. And it's basically these, events or things that are created to part tourism, part, they use the paranormal, cryptozoology, the ufology, the significance of these areas as a way to draw tourism in.
Mm-hmm.
You have all these events, and I'm not knocking anybody for doing these events. I think some of these events are super cool. It also allows people to come and relay their story in an area sometimes where they feel safer because other people have experienced these things happening. So, and of course now in Carbondale, the marketing and sales manager for the Carbondale Grand Hotel at that point said basically he envisioned the festival becoming an annual event to celebrate an interesting piece of the city's history.
Right.
So right away they're looking at it like, hey, we could do this every year and draw people in, and it's a moneymaker, so they can just keep doing it, keep beating the story. So sometimes the story becomes grander than the actual event.
Yeah. Well, I mean, you got to keep it interesting to keep people coming, And like Cindy says here, she posts any reports of alien creatures or strange occurrences in the area, just the object falling to the water. I didn't find anything about beings or creatures or anything. It was just the light and then them pulling an object out of the water.
So to actually, a little off topic, but actually no, it goes with the question, so it is on topic. For just general information, from 1970 to 1976, around that time frame, Pennsylvania had the highest in the continental U.S. had the highest reports of UFOs and Bigfoot sightings. But also they had the highest combined sightings of Bigfoot along with a UFO.
Right.
Or some form of unidentified flying object and Bigfoot, or a large hairy creature similar to Bigfoot.
Right.
Hence
the Kecksburg incident, like we talked about before.
Yeah. Well, Kecksburg's before 64. This is 1970 to 1976, around the centennial.
Oh, right.
So, yeah, Pennsylvania actually had a large number of, like I said, we were leading the continental U.S. at that point in UFO sightings. We were also combined UFO Bigfoot sightings and just plain Bigfoot sightings. So, yeah, you did have some creatures, a couple, some of the more blown out of proportion stories where there were things coming out of light crafts meeting with the Bigfoots that were kind of described like a taller gray, and so there are reports in that area, and when I say that area, this is large part of the coal region of Pennsylvania into through the Appalachian Mountains and stuff like that. So you have a lot of these weird wood, like out in the woods or out in farmland, up on mountains, incidents.
Yeah.
Of UFOs and some weird stuff for weird animals.
Right. So yeah, I mean, but the Carbondale story didn't have
nothing specific with Carbondale.
Yeah. But you're right. In that time frame, there were a lot of correlation between odd creatures, Bigfoot-like creatures, in UFO crafts. So to get back to the topic, to the Carbondale, that pretty much surmises the Carbondale incident, and at the time, next to Kecksburg, that was a pretty big story. And like Chad said, there is, the festivals and everything that they have to go along with that, which I would love to go up to that one of these years with you if they still, do have it. That'd be cool to check out. But that was one of the bigger reports in Pennsylvania, and we want to cover a few other small ones. I mean, we are past the hour now, but I do want to cover a few other things before we wrap the show up. And a lot of the stories that we are going to be talking about are from this. There we go. UFOs above PA, and this is by Gerard J. Medvec and Mark Soro. So they have a lot of information specifically pertaining to UFO reports in Pennsylvania, and there's a lot of like bigger reports, bigger stories in that book. But I just kind of bullet pointed a lot of the shorter stories just so you guys could kind of see or hear just the vast number. And one of the things that I want to bring up here is this here is a map of UFO sightings in Pennsylvania. And this is January to June in 2020. So in a 6-month span in 2020, there were all these reports. And as we said, or as Chad had said previously in the Carbondale story, MUFON in Pennsylvania averages 25 to 35 cases a month. So there's a lot that's going on in this state monthly. But I mean, not everything is reported mainstream, but I mean, you have a lot going on in just Pennsylvania alone. Let me get that out of here. So let's see. We're going to talk about a few short stories or shorter reports. Do you want to take the first few? These are out of Western Pennsylvania.
Did you want to talk about your dad?
Oh yeah, well, one of the stories, and I talked about this in a previous show, so it's kind of repeating. But my dad, who sadly is no longer with us, but I remember him telling me a story of when he was a kid. He grew up in Mahanoy City, which again was a coal mining town. He was playing in the backyard, minding his own business, and some of the neighbors were out too. And he said there is this craft, typical UFO crafts, a circular disc-shaped craft, came down, hovered over the playground, which was located a few streets behind his house. And he said it came down, hovered there for a few seconds, and then boom, just in a flash, took off. That was it. It was just a short, quick flash or whatever you want to call it. He saw it. A few of the neighbors saw it. That was a report. A Pennsylvania report that is very close to home for me, obviously, because it was from my dad. So I thought I would just share that since we're talking about Pennsylvania reports. So that was one, and that was probably in the 1950s, because I mean, my dad was born in the 40s. So that was probably, for him to recall it, I would probably say early to mid 1950s.
Can you pull up that picture real quick again?
Which one?
The
map?
Yeah. So, like, Cindy had asked a question: are these more wooded areas, large bodies of water, or anything perhaps in pattern? We're going to discuss a little more about the pattern. If you look to the Ohio side of Pennsylvania, that's a lot of mountainy kind of farmland mixture.
Yeah, you have the Allegheny Mountain Range out there, which is pretty big.
You also have some, decent sized rivers like out towards Pittsburgh, which I would say is probably somewhere around those clusters would be the city of Pittsburgh. Mm-hmm. When you see those 5 that kind of go down in the middle of the state, that's going to be where the mountains kind of cut through there. And then the lower part of the state is going to be semi-mountainous, but where that last one would almost be around Gettysburg. Mm-hmm. Famous for the paranormal and the battlefield. I would hope it's more famous for the battlefield, but
paratourism.
Yeah, and then you look through most of that lower section of Pennsylvania that's going towards Philadelphia. That's a mixture of farmlands, smaller cities. As you get closer to Philly, they get a lot. It's the what we call like the Great Northeast of Philly. It's the suburbs.
Mhm.
And if you go from that large cluster, you'll see two right next to each other and a third one right below it. That's actually where Les and I are from.
Yeah, yeah.
I would say that's almost lower part of the county, almost towards Pine Grove.
Mhm.
But that's all coal region. It's very mountainous with some big, large valleys with some nice, farmland. And then as you go up towards the upper part of the New Jersey side of the state, New York, New Jersey side of it, you're in vast wooded areas. Like you'll hit a city or a town every so often, and then you will drive for 45 minutes to an hour in nothing but some of the most beautiful woodlands that you would ever see. It's also an area where there are a lot of even modern Bigfoot sightings.
Yeah. Yep.
So I just wanted to kind of clear that up. And then to get in, you can pull the map down. Thank you very much.
Yep. No problem.
You're looking at Butler County, which is in the western part of Pennsylvania, on June 16th of 2010, approximately 11 p.m. A person witnessed 6 fighter jets chasing a blinding white spherical light in the skies over his home. While the object moved continuously, it did achieve a short burst of speed to keep ahead of the fighter jets.
Almost like it was taunting them.
Mm-hmm.
It was like, you can't catch me.
Yeah, it's kind of like the fast kid who, when you're playing tag, always runs away from you.
The one I always hated because I was never the fast kid.
I pretty much still hate those kids. Even though we're all now adults. I probably couldn't catch them.
Yeah, I know.
And then you go to like Cannonsburg, which is in Washington County again, which is the western part of the state.
Mhm.
January 12th of 2008, approximately 6 p.m., 5 people, 3 in a car and 2 strangers at a nearby parking lot, saw a flying triangle. The car had been heading northwest on Pike Street towards Route 980. While
Mhm.
stopped at an intersection, a large white light appeared over the traffic light a fair distance away and was traveling directly towards the witnesses. The object flew over them. On the bottom of the triangle, there was a large center light surrounded by 3 smaller red lights. The object had the appearance of being see-through. 2 of the other witnesses in the parking lot near the intersection pointed up at the triangle. So we're going to kind of correlate this all after I get done reading all these.
Yep.
East Springfield, Erie County, December 12th, 2005, approximately 9:30 p.m. While driving south on a local road, the witness saw a bright blue-white 2-foot diameter ball of light. It hovered close to the ground. And then we go to Greensburg, Westmoreland County. I've actually been there. That's a scary thing. November 16th, it's actually not a bad area. It's out towards Pittsburgh. November 16, 2009, approximately 3 p.m., going west on Route 30 near the Mountain View Inn, the witness saw 2 birds fighting each other. Fighting each other over a highway. Upon a closer look, these were not birds, but 5-pointed star-shaped objects. They were spinning, rotating, and circling each other. Circular ringed ridges were on the bodies, and they emanated from a center point outward. They were flying close to the treetops. The back of the craft each had a giant red light about 3 feet in height and 6 feet in length. Vertical row of additional lights that would flash when the object moved away. They were unsteady and wobbly, tilting side to side. So one of the things, kind of correlate some of this stuff. I know we're going to end up going way over. Well, we're already 15 over our hour, but So if we look at a lot of these, they're seen in this part of the state in the colder season. In Pennsylvania, when you start getting into October, November, December, January, even into like to us, it really up there doesn't really get warm until like late April, May.
Mm-hmm.
It's
Yeah,
warm,
true.
but it's cold at night.
Yeah.
So a lot of these reports were in the colder part of the year.
Mm-hmm.
And
and again, this is in western part of the state, so it is colder because you have the lake effect weather from Lake Erie.
Yeah. So you're looking at times of the year where it could be below freezing, or your daytime high might be freezing.
Right.
So one of the things we're looking and we're kind of discussing and we're thinking about this is why are we seeing these objects at this time of year?
Right.
And we were kind of thinking about the mountains, and one of the, like Les and I were talking about this, the mountains are glacier stone deposits, a lot of that area.
Yeah, basically the entire tops of the mountain ranges are nothing but these glacier stone deposits.
And Les, what is something that's found in glacier stone?
Quartz.
Okay. And if you guys think about it, like you go in any, metaphysical shop, what's one thing they all sell? Quartz stones, because it supposedly has these abilities to channel energy and direct energy and
radiate energy. Yep.
Yeah. So if you have this group coming to this area and maybe they're looking for this, these quartz deposits or other minerals, that maybe something in their science, these things are very necessary, and maybe during the colder part of the year, the rocks aren't as hot. So maybe their technology allows it, with it being colder, allows their technology to more easily pick up on the deposits.
Right. Or it's kind of like what we were talking about before too. Is it a case of trying not to be seen? Like you're saying that there could be these people, these beings here already, but they're trying to stay hidden or stay out of sight. So are they coming here during the colder months because there's not as many people outside? They're not really out looking at the skies, so they could kind of navigate around without being seen as much or as easily. I don't know.
Also, one of the things I thought of, and kind of one of those loosely thought out theories that I come up with at times,
but they're always good.
Since these are glacier stones, these mountain areas, are they looking at the remnants of the ice age, maybe due to them having some involvement in it happening to the environment? Or were they in contact with our ice age ancestors? We had discussed in the Roswell stuff, like the Clovis is actually more where the crash site is than Roswell. You have the Clovis Points. You have you have this ancient society that also has these petroglyphs, and the modern Native Americans in those areas say, "Oh no, those were there before us."
Right.
So is it maybe again one of those signal points? Like,
well, you have a good point where you said, are they responsible for the ice age? Now, maybe not necessarily, but we talk about the rise and falls of all these civilizations. Maybe that was part of it. Maybe that's what created the Great Flood, because I mean the earth was already at the freezing point. It was in, because the ice ages happen every hundreds of thousands of years. Maybe they had something to do with the warm up, and then that was the flood that came in, and because they were like, all right, this civilization or this time frame is at a point where it needs to be knocked down again. Did they do it? I don't know. It's all very good points. It's a stretch, like we were talking about earlier. I mean, these are definitely, throw it against the wall, see what sticks kind of theories, but you have these historical carvings and whatnot, all that fall around certain time frames and whatnot. So it could definitely be a possibility.
Oh, and we also have petroglyphs in PA. So.
Oh yeah, yeah. And again, like we talked about in the portals episode, every time you have these areas of high strangeness, there's always these petroglyphs. So it's not just a thing happening now. It's something that happened thousands of years ago with these early civilizations, primitive civilizations. I mean, for lack of better terms, but you know what I mean? There's all this stuff literally, etched in stone depicting these phenomenon.
Mm-hmm. So let's move to the eastern part of the state.
Yeah, if you go to actually, I think we flip-flopped. Yeah, I was supposed to do the western side, and I color-coded it and everything. I guess that's why you were kind of like, what? All right, I'll do these ones. So now these reports, again, it's just a collection. I might not go through all of them just because.
Just hit some highlights.
Yeah. So Lehigh, Allentown, Lehigh County, August 24th, 2010, approximately 10:25 p.m. It was reported that a large silver triangle, about 65 feet across, flew at about 100 feet above the ground over the area, and it had a bright round light on each tip. You have Bloomsburg in Columbia County, January 26, 2006, approximately 11 p.m. 4 witnesses studying the Orion constellation noticed that one bright star-like object was moving towards them. Observing through binoculars, one witness described the object, which was now directly over their house, as diamond-shaped, with a bright light in each corner. They watched the object for about 10 minutes. And then we go down to, here's one in Scranton again, so close to Carbondale. Lackawanna County, June 1st in 2008, approximately 4:20 p.m. A dark object was seen flying from north to south near the local airport. The witness lived near the airport and was used to seeing planes overhead on a daily basis. The dark object moved slower than the planes that were flying nearby at that moment. The object had no wings. Its shiny metallic surface reflected the sun. No sound came from it. The object was flying lower than the planes, and it was smaller than them, but bigger than a car, which is interesting. And then you go down to Quakertown in Bucks County, which is where that big cluster of UFOs were on that map. So Quakertown in Bucks County, June 25th, 2010, approximately 6 p.m. An object shaped like a flying white cigarette flew over a witness's yard northbound. The item was about the size of a large shopping center. Pretty damn big, right? And appeared to fade away at the edges. This is a congested area not far from the former Willow Grove Naval Air Station. The object, which it's not that close, which we were talking about earlier when we were before the show started. The object moved from left to right smoothly and was observed for about 60 seconds. Binoculars were used. About 90 minutes later, a neighbor verified that he too saw the flying cigarette traveling westbound. And then the last one that I'll cover here, there's several more. I'll just, Philadelphia in Philadelphia County, May 10th, 2008, approximately 6 p.m. From a top floor apartment window facing east near the Delaware River, halfway between the Betsy Ross and Tuscany Palmyra bridges, a witness saw a giant boomerang flying about 200 yards away. It had 3 amber headlights and 6 bright white lights under each wing. So we covered the west and the eastern side of the state. There are definite similarities in a lot of these. Now, and also keep in mind, a lot of these reports were fairly recent, from 2000 until now. So you're talking within the last 20 years or more recent. This isn't going back decades. This is just going back a few years. So that's what I liked about this book, is it's a lot of current reports. A lot of similarities that was strewn like commonplace throughout the book with a lot of these sightings. Diamond or triangular shape, all had lights at the furthest points. Some of them were reporting a dome type light that would open up on the bottom of these crafts and emanating a larger, brighter light. I mean, some of them were odd, like that, those 5-pointed like pentagram shaped, whatever discs that were kind of floating. That was just bizarre. But a lot of these, it's either the triangular or the cigar shaped or cigarette shaped crafts. Now, Bridget brought up a question here, which I will post here. She says, look at what the military is making. Could it be them? Are the UFOs near military bases? It's ironic that you asked that question, because Chad and I were talking about this before the show started earlier today. That was one of the questions that I had posed to Chad, is a lot of the similarities and a lot of constant themes or connecting themes were, oh, it was near a military base, or it was close to this base. But let me bring up the map here really quick. So for those of you who could see, and for those who might be listening later, this is a map of the eastern part of the United States, and it is like a buckshot. They're sprinkled with military bases along the East Coast into kind of the Midwest, I guess you could say, of the larger military bases. There are plenty of other smaller bases sprinkled throughout in between all these. So, Chad, you want to kind of talk about our theory there on the military bases?
Well, yeah, I mean, just in PA, which is basically, you see Toby Hanna, AD, Carlisle Barracks, Letterkenny. These are some of the bigger bases. Now, I know of probably 4 or 5 others that aren't even shown on that map right there. And so basically, everybody always does this. Well, is it military? Well, it could, yeah, it could, or are they studying the military? Well, yeah, they could be. But as you can see on that map, it's very hard to go anywhere in especially in that northern part of the United States without base. So are they, sightings that just happen to be close to a military base, like the one Les was saying about Willow Grove? Also, I think sometimes these authors make these correlations to bolster this idea or to gain favor with people who believe this belief system of, well, it's related to military. We're seeing sightings around military bases. Well, yeah. Willow Grove and Quakertown are not that close.
Right.
Now Quakertown to Allentown, which was another area that we had mentioned in those sightings, is a lot closer. You're 30, 40 minutes or so, because you go through Coopersburg and then Quakertown's the next. Again, places I've been that I regret ever going for other reasons. But so we always say, like, these military, sightings around military bases. Well, in our state, there are so many military related installations, current, former. We have National Guard bases. We have several of the different air wings are stationed. If you drive capital of Harrisburg, you will probably hit about 5 to 10 smaller military installations. So,
the Indiantown Gap and all that stuff, which wasn't on that list.
Yeah, well, you had Carlisle Barracks, but you also don't have the Naval Supply Depot that I used to work as a contractor at. Mm-hmm. You don't have Indiantown Gap. You don't have the large armory at Allentown. You don't have the large armory in Harrisburg. You don't have any of the smaller sites listed. Pottsville. I think Hazleton has one. Wilkes-Barre, Scranton. So you have these different sized military bases, but I think it's more or less people see stuff in these areas and then they correlate it to the military. Like the army base is only 50 miles over that mountain. Yeah, well, 50 miles in the other direction, it's some city. So are they coming to look at the city? They coming to look at the country? And then you also think about like those like reports out in the South America's Southwest. Oh, it's always around Area 51. You know, like these stories are always tied to those military installations.
Yeah.
Well, these areas, you know, it's hard again not to run into some kind of military installation because where are military installations, testing facilities, stuff like that? Generally in places way outside the normal range where you're getting to towns where you might be 3 hours from the nearest town, but you're 50 miles from the base, but you're the nearest town to it. So, people see something strange. Well, it's got to be about the military base. Well,
Mhm.
no, it's also an area of high strangeness because then you start to get into like the Superstition Mountains, all these different areas out in the America Southwest. Um, Pennsylvania has all the similarities. We have Boxcar Rock, which is allegedly an ancient gold mine that the Native Americans traded with the French fur trappers gold, which is not necessarily native to Pennsylvania, and they had
Yeah.
large quantities of it, and they had no value for it.
Yeah.
The Native Americans were giving it to the fur trappers because they didn't value it.
Right.
They said, and when asked where it was, they said, "Oh, it's in a cave system, and the people that were here before us gave it to us.
Right.
They left it here for us to use." So I don't necessarily always buy the whole like, especially now, um, here in the United States, there are a lot more military bases. I know in Australia, though, there are a lot of sightings, like with your Blue Ridge Mountains, which is funny because we also have Blue Ridge Mountains in that area. So in PA and stuff like that are called the
Yeah.
Blue
Yeah.
Ridge. But I know in Australia, you guys have the Blue Ridge Mountains, which is an area of high strangeness.
Mhm.
I don't know a lot about the Australian military base. I know we have one in Australia for some odd reason. I also know my grandfather, when he was during World War II, was in Australia. I know you folks were nice enough to house some of us, Americans there for a while.
Mhm.
So I don't. Maybe that's something that we can look into. Is in other countries, is it again a thing of you have so many military bases or military installations that no matter where you would fly in the state, you're
You're going to run into one.
yeah. Now you also got to understand some of those valleys that we're referring to in PA, like in between the mountains, there are some big open stretches of land. So if you
Mhm.
see a light off in the distance and it flies, towards you so far, again, like we said, you you could go either direction, say any of the 4 or 5 directions, around you, and you'd eventually be within so many miles of a military installation.
Yeah. Yeah. But I mean, to Bridget's point as well, I mean, it very well could be uh, a new craft that they're testing, or because if you think about the stealth bomber, very triangular shape, has the lights on the tips and everything, and we didn't know what that was at the time, and it's painted black. It's capable of avoiding radar and all that stuff, so it has all the characteristics of something that is meant to be not detected, but there was now it's a known thing. But you know what I mean, at the time when it was flying around being tested, it was a UFO. So could it be military related and not extraterrestrial at all? Absolutely. Could it be extraterrestrial and they're coming to just kind of keep an eye on things? That's a possibility. And in an attempt to kind of wrap the show up, I guess that's what Chad and I kind of want to do, is pose the question to all of you. We want to hear from you. So write in the comments, what do you all think it could be? Let us know. Because I mean, there are so many reports, like we said, there's reports coming in that are just high strangeness, very odd, hard to explain. What do you guys think? Why do you think aliens are coming here, and do you think a lot of these reports actually are extraterrestrial? Let us know in the comments. That said, it is 10 o'clock. We are a half hour past our show. I want to thank everybody for tuning in. We appreciate every one of you. Great interaction tonight, everybody. We appreciate the questions. Yeah. So, Chad, as always, brother, thank you for being here with me, and thank you for putting the show together. What the heck was that?
That's
Were
the
you playing a sound effect?
No, it was the spring.
Oh. All right. So yes, thank you, Chad. Thank you, everybody, for tuning in. We will be back in 2 weeks, and I apologize that the show was actually a week late. I ended up getting sick. My whole family actually got sick over Thanksgiving, and we decided to postpone. So that's why we are a week past what we should have done. But we will be back in 2 weeks, and I think we are going to continue. Sorry for that prepubescent week there.
I was gonna say, did you just hit your third puberty or what?
Yeah. I think we're going to be continuing the extraterrestrial theme. So tonight we talked about why are there so many sightings? Why do you think Earth is so interesting to these beings or possibly future us? So the next topic we want to talk about are different alien species that have been reported on Earth. So we're going to be talking about alien species, possible hybridization. So that's the next show. So join us in 2 weeks, and we'll cover that. Again, thank you, everybody, for tuning in. Thank you, Chad. You want to add anything?
No, well, thank you for joining me this evening. And again, like Les said, everybody is really great. A lot of interaction, and always feel free to jump in and talk. Send us messages. Via our email is encounters@explorersgroup.com. Les will occasionally check that. You can always send it to the Explorers page and stuff like that. And just thank you guys.
Facebook and YouTube. Yeah, probably the easiest way.
Yeah. But thank you guys all for joining us, and hopefully we'll see you again in 2 weeks. Have a good week. Have a nice weekend, hopefully, everybody, and see you later.